2024. This is the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with a verification that the meeting has been properly posted.
Yes.
Thank you. We're going to start with seeking approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the October 1st, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Koenig. Any comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I forgot to note that Ms. Kozlowski is excused for tonight. Thank you. Passes 4-0. We do have an opportunity for public comment. Did anyone sign up to speak tonight?
Not tonight.
All right, thank you. Moving on. Our first discussion and possible action item tonight is on Board Policy 2340, field trips and other district-sponsored trips and other district-sponsored trips. And second policy 8640, transportation for field and other district-sponsored trips. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gennerman.
Good evening. So thank you. Tonight, these policies that I'm bringing forward, there's a recommendation from Neola. So what I wanted to do is first talk about how these policies are being recommended to be merged, and then go over just to highlight a few of those changes together. First, the second policy, the 8640, the recommendation is to rescind this policy. And what the recommendation is to fully merge this policy into the existing policy of 2340. And what I'll do when we get to that part is I'll highlight there's one minimal change there, so I'll highlight that when we get there. Overall, the policy itself reads as it has been. As we were working through the policy as a teaching and learning team, one of the things that we wanted to recommend for change is really when it comes to communication around student behavior. So everything would be the same in the policy. You'll notice that in section H, of day trips, there's a statement saying about students may be excluded from participating in a field trip. And this would be for academic or disciplinary reasons. That piece was not included in the overnight trip part. And so just for alignment, we wanted to include that. And so that's where you'll see here is that you have A through G with a recommendation to add that same wording for the overnight trips. We thought that would be appropriate given any field trip. We'd always, consider student behavior and performance up to that. So that is one of the recommended changes, and then I'll scroll down to the part where it has the transportation and other field trip district-sponsored trips information. This is really taken word for word from the policy that's being rescinded. The one area that is changed is just the additional clarification around adding commercial driver's license piece to the information. Previously, it had said driver in the old policy. So that really summarizes the two major changes. Again, the one policy would be rescinded and then included into this policy if approved.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments about that? No changes to the process that you're currently using for review and approval?
No, we did take this as an opportunity to enhance our processes and practices. So included at your seats, you'll see this two-sided field trip handout. Stacy, I have to give her lots of kudos for this. This started last year as we were working with athletic directors around field trips and needing the timing to get the timing right. And oftentimes the athletic directors work with coaches who aren't our staff like on a day-to-day basis, so they didn't always know the procedures. So Stacy started putting together these really quick guides for anyone who's going to recommend a field trip. So what we did is we used this as an opportunity to cross-check everything in the policy with each of our forms. It's gets very cumbersome when, everything is connected. So we really ensure that we have similar language throughout all the forms, and you can see it highlighted here. Pending the approval from tonight in the full board next week, what we would do is take these resources to our all admin meetings, just sharing that so principals can then share it out with all their teachers and anyone who's leading field trips. And then we would also go to athletic director meeting to review this one more time with them and talk about a few of the highlighted pieces here. And then this would be on our website as a staff resource so that people can go to the forms and documents very easily. Stacy will continue to monitor all the overnight field trips as they come forward, but we just took advantage of this as an opportunity to just look at our forms and align any of the language throughout the forms with the policy.
This is really nice, thank you. Mrs. Koenig.
I was just going to say the same thing. This is fantastic. As someone that remembers having to go to different locations and different binders and different websites to get this information, the different forms, the fact that it's all consolidated on one sheet like this is amazing. And I'm sure the electronic copy has links you can actually click and have the documents right at your fingertips. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. Thank you for all your hard work on this. This is wonderful. And new people, too, coming in know exactly where to find everything, and they're not relying on where they think things are, or no one knows where things are. Thank you for doing that.
And I think, for the most part, most of these field trips are planned well in advance and meet the deadlines and things. I think the things that kind of get tricky are those athletics or extracurricular activity related or club related things where actually it's not that. It's the curricular aligned activities that end up being overnight type things because somebody qualifies for a next level competition or a state level competition, and then things happen really fast. So I think having all of that in one place is really going to be nice. All right. Any other questions? I notice it points to state statute, which is consistent with all the language that we already had in there, so I'm fine with that. So we are agendized for discussion with possible action. And so if somebody were, I don't have a draft motion here. There is a recommended language in board docs. Mr. Zenobia can see that because we could actually take them both simultaneously.
Looking for it.
I think you have it right in front of you.
I'll give it a go. I would move approval of Board Policy 2340, field trips and other district-sponsored trips, Board Policy 8640, transportation for field and other district-sponsored trips, as presented.
Can I make a recommendation?
Please do. Have it in front of me.
Move to approve the revisions to 2340 and rescind policy 8640. Was that your intention?
Yes, it was. Thank
Okay.
you for the clarification.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Everybody clear on what we're doing? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0. All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to our content areas. We're going to be talking about Spanish world language resources tonight. Back to Mrs. Getterman. I think we have Mrs. Garcia who's joining us tonight.
Joining me up here tonight is Dee Garcia, who really is a teaching and learning director for our middle schools, as well as multilingual and global services throughout the system. So you can introduce your guests. You also have the slide deck that you have open. Tonight, what she's presenting is information about the curriculum review process, as we have done in so many other ways. So it's very similar format to others.
Good evening. Give me just one moment to get the slide deck up. Thank you. Joining me tonight is Miss Rachel Faust. She is a third-year Spanish teacher at Waukesha West High School. We did have two other colleagues that were planning to attend with us. However, they had some unexpected situations that they had to deal with and aren't able to come with us. So tonight we're talking about the first opportunity that I've had in my role to actually review the Spanish World Language curricular resources. It's been quite a while since we've taken a look, and a lot has changed in education, so our intention is to walk you through our process. We'll start with slide 4, Stacy. Thank you. Yay, okay, great. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So what you see before you is a scope and sequence of the Spanish World Language courses that we offer. Along the top horizontal bar is the name of each course. Students begin their pathway in Spanish World Language in the 6th grade, taking a 9-week wheel in the 6th grade of Spanish as a world language. Students that are interested in pursuing the world language can go on to 7th grade, where we offer a course called Global Perspectives. That's a semester-long course, but it's offered on A days throughout the entire school year to help children to acquire the language over time. And then we also offer a pre-AP Spanish literature class, which is an 8th grade course that was built for our dual language students when we are unable to find an educator who can teach language arts, bilingual language arts. So students would then take an English language arts, and they would take the 8th grade dual language seminar course. That's a year-long course. The first opportunity then for our students to take high school level credit-bearing courses starts with that pre-AP Spanish course or Spanish 1, which is offered to all of our students between 8th and 12th grade. And as you can see down the line, we offer Spanish 2, 3, 4, et cetera, culminating in the 3 AP level classes. We offer Spanish 5, which is AP Spanish Language and Culture. And we offer AP Spanish 6, which is AP Spanish Literature. And we do offer a course called AP Seminar, which we have adapted to be taught in Spanish, and we call that course Dual Language Seminar. Students do not participate in the AP assessment of that course because the AP College Board has not yet been able to accept their work in Spanish. So those are the courses that we offer. If you go ahead and click. For our curriculum review, what we're really looking for is the main bread and butter of our Spanish World Language Department, which is Spanish levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the AP Language and AP Literature. Thank you.
You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about some of the enrollment trends in the Spanish courses since 2020 to 2021. So 2/3 of students who take Spanish 1 continue on to Spanish 2, if you could click. Thank you. It's often a requirement for many colleges to take 2 years of world language, and less than half of students who take Spanish 2 then continue on to Spanish 3. And we just have a concern over the scope and sequence and the variability and increased rigor over time. And 10% of students have continued through Spanish 4 since 2020 to 2021. We do think that part of this is the effects of COVID and the need for an articulated scope and sequence and high-quality materials and common assessments between all levels. Our rationale for the curricular review for Spanish 1 through 4 and then AP 5 and 6. Since August, our team has been engaged in the curriculum design process, and we've had an opportunity to develop a common philosophy around instruction and materials, and we've been able to complete a thorough review that has led us to the table tonight. Just some context, the last resources adopted by the school district for Spanish World Language was in 1999, and the World Language team last addressed the quality of the Spanish curriculum in 2012 and determined to build their own curriculum from scratch. However, 70% of Spanish teachers are new to the district in the last 3 years. And in 2024, there's just been shifts in pedagogy standards and tech integration that have outpaced the viability of our own in-house units of study. We are concerned about a cohort scope and sequence, and as a newer teacher, I've found that we lack the instructional resources to support my instruction, including supports to differentiate for all learners and accessible digital resources to interact with the language. The lack of clarity around the scope and sequence, common assessment, and accessibility of resources that build skill over the years has led us to believe that our student enrollment drops because we have not had the opportunity to adequately prepare our learners for each course as they build from less to most complex.
So the timeline that our team is working on includes going through the curriculum design process through phase one, which is a review of current curricular resources and assessment, to develop a kind of current state, which you're hearing about tonight. So we've taken between August and October of this year to engage in that process. And we have determined that as a team, what we'd like to do is come to you to start our piloting of some curricular resources. We will start our pilot in November. We are piloting 4 total resources. We have one pilot that will be initiating in November and culminating on January 20th, and then another one starting January 20th and finishing at the end of February. Our team will at that time make a recommendation based on some common criteria, which we'll share with you, and we're hoping to bring this issue back to you for discussion in March, and if things go well, we're hoping that we can prepare you to make a decision to approve a resource for us in April or thereafter. So the typical components of any Spanish curriculum, it's very simple and very common with all curricular resources. We expect teachers' editions, student editions. We're currently piloting all digital student editions as we have with social studies, English language arts, et cetera. There will be online digital student workbooks that can interact with all of our core applications, and of course, digital resources and media. Go ahead. So the resources under consideration include those that you see above. So for Spanish 1 through 4, we took a look at a program called Reporteros. Reporteros is currently being used in eAchieve as of this summer and is very highly regarded. We are also looking at one called Encuentros and one that is called Entre Culturas. Entre Culturas is used in Arrowhead School District and I believe Pewaukee and Elmbrook. For the AP Spanish language, there's a new resource called Generación AP. That one has yet to be released, but will be released in copy in January, and our teachers will be piloting that. Temas is the second one. This is a very historic resource that's been around for quite a while, and typically comes in textbook form, but it's a very reliable resource for teaching AP Spanish language. And the last one is called Triángulo AP Apreciado. This is a resource that some teachers have had some experience with in previous districts and came well recommended. So we have edited all of those resources. For AP Spanish literature, there is really one resource that is recommended out there. We have this resource currently as our curricular resource, but what we're looking to do is update it with a new copyright, and if there are digital resources, acquire those. So we will be essentially soft piloting Azulejo, which is something that we currently use. Go ahead. So as I mentioned, these are the resources and where they are currently being used. After meeting with each of the vendors in our department, we considered the other districts in our community and region and what they were using. eAchieve, as I said, is using Reporteros, and they will be using Generación AP when it is released for eAchieve classes. Our team felt very strongly after meeting with all of the representatives that these resources would best serve our student needs, but that we would only have capacity to really pilot 2 resources per level. And so that is what we are attempting to do. We will be moving forward with the ones that you see in the red boxes. So we will be starting Reporteros right now in November. And then in January, February, we will be piloting Entre Culturas. The AP Generación AP will be piloted. The Temas material will also be piloted, and then, of course, Azulejo for AP Spanish literature. I wanted to demonstrate to you which schools are piloting which resource in the event that you are interested in visiting at any time. As you can see, the peach-colored materials will represent the Reporteros and Generación AP. We've got that in all levels across the district. The Azulejo literature text is being piloted at all of the high schools. It's a high school level course. And then the Wayside Entre Culturas and Temas will be piloted by the teachers that are marked with the blue X. So we have a pretty good subsection. One of the issues that we encounter here is that at the middle school, we have 3 Spanish teachers. One of them moonlights as an e-achieve teacher, so he's already been using Reporteros since the beginning of this school year, and as a result, isn't really piloting, but is in fact implementing. So we have a very good cross-section and diverse representation. So when we began to entertain the idea that we needed a Spanish world language curricular review process, one of the things I did is investigate the areas in which we needed to seek alignment. So we're really looking at alignment to standard and alignment to instruction. There are 6 attributes that we feel are really important. The first is standards. The second is adherence to evidence-based second language acquisition pedagogy. And the next, that the materials be authentic. Authentic in terms of representing the people, places, cultural artifacts that are present in not only Latin America and Europe, but also in the United States. When we looked at instruction, teachers felt that it was very important to have a resource that provided significant scaffolding for assessment so that they are able to intervene early to prevent learning delay or learning gaps with students so that they continue to maintain their Spanish language learning over time. We also know that we wanted student supports that would include opportunities for students to engage in multiple ways and be very actively engaged in the classroom. And then finally, as Rachel discussed, providing our teachers with teacher support so that they are prepared to use the resources that they have and no longer need to search for the resources and can instead focus on their instruction. We're very astute to looking for resources that have supports for heritage learners, supports for students that have IEPs, and supports for students whose learning styles are active and or in need of more engagement. So our next steps, as I mentioned, we will start our first pilot. Actually, today we had training, and we'll go through January 20th. It's a nice breadth of time because we do have semester exams happening. We do have a winter break. There's a lot of variability that happens in December. And then the second pilot will go January 21st to about February 24th. We do plan to vote and vet on a recommendation for you all in March, and then come back for action in April if things go well. So we would like to open it up to your questions. Please feel free to ask Rachel anything about the process that we've led so far, and we're excited to talk to you about this.
Thank you. What questions? Mrs. Koenig.
It's not so much a question, I guess. I'm just so surprised that it's been since 1999
Yes,
that
ma'am.
we've actually looked at what we're using. I know we had kind of an upgrade or a change, if you will, in 2012, but still, that's 12 years ago.
Yeah, I can speak to that, that the biggest shift for us is the use and availability of technology resources. We have one-to-one iPad correspondence, and I would say teachers, and Rachel can talk about this, spend a lot of time just looking for resources, links, video, and media products that actually work, and ensuring that those links work over years. It's a lot to curate. So we're definitely ready for something that is very highly engaging and ready at fingertips.
I agree, seeing that this is one of our jewels of our district, you know, our dual language programs. I mean, I'm glad to know that we're looking into this and moving forward with this.
Anyone else? Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, as far as the curriculum's been since '99, and you gave kind of an idea of how many students enter the program and then continue on.
Yeah.
Have those trends kind of held? I know you mentioned the COVID years, and I don't know, maybe you can explain why that was better or worse at this time on these students?
We used
or-
to have quite consistent enrollment in Spanish. COVID interrupted the trajectory for many kids, so they ended up with an interrupted schooling, and it was hard to recuperate after that. I think we've had difficulty in recuperating since then, and of course, since COVID, we've introduced many more opportunities for students in AVID, in dual enrollment, in MAID. There's just been other growth, and so students have had more choices. I would say also, as Rachel alluded to, that when your scope and sequence is a little disjointed or implemented differently by different people because there's so much variability, what you get are gaps. And when students experience gaps in foundational skills, it's really hard for them to continue to excel, and so they end up just simply not proceeding. So we would have had two other colleagues here with us tonight that could have talked about what it's like to get students in the Spanish level 3 and how they have to continually loop back and forth between level 1 and 2 to remediate some of the things that aren't firm. That just has to do with like a different implementation of each level.
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, thank you both for the presentation. I really appreciate the level of thought and detail that went into this. So with some of these curriculum that have been used in other school districts around us, I'd be curious to see if, that those resources have led to higher scores on AP exams, if they've led to more students staying in Spanish through Spanish 3 for AP and everything like that, because I think you're absolutely right. Spanish, any foreign language, you need that scope and sequence to go from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and so on, because it's just a giant building block for the next step. And if you have those gaps, it is really difficult to get to Spanish 3, and then all of a sudden you realize, okay, you're missing a huge piece of this. So I'd be curious to see too if these lead to more people sticking with the program beyond just the 1 or 2 years that are necessary for college admission.
One of them, I can tell you, I've had contact with many of the people that oversee world languages in those communities, and I can tell you that emphatically, the woman I spoke to in Arrowhead told me that what she's noticed right away with this curricular resource is the facility with which the students can actually communicate. So they just don't know the language, they can use the language and speak the language. They're very enthusiastic about their resource. I think also that we have different populations in different communities, obviously. There's a very, very high commitment to world language education in some districts, and in some districts there are just many more options or a different level of value and commitment. So it's hard to compare with that, but everyone we talk to feels strongly about what they've chosen.
Then, follow-up question, do you happen to know offhand or ballpark roughly how many students that go through at least 4 years of Spanish are either first or second language Spanish students at home, where that's their native language? Just because I know in my personal experience with 4 years of Spanish in school, my friends who are Spanish-speaking students natively, they always had a kind of trickier time as you got to those higher levels, because spoken Spanish, when you're, similar to, native, people whose first language is English, it's just kind of second nature. You don't have to think about learning those grammatical skills and everything like that. So I'd be curious to see how our students who are already Spanish speakers who are enrolled in those higher level of Spanish, how they perform with these various curriculums. Because I think it's tricky to teach somebody who's been doing it their entire life. Okay, here's the more academic way of teaching Spanish.
So we enroll about 140 dual language students per grade level in the school district. Those students, when they come into high school, do not take Spanish 1, 2, 3, or 4. They start at AP Spanish language. Having the linguistic talent and resources that they have, their pathway into world languages is already at the collegiate level predominantly. We do have some students that choose to take Spanish 4 before they take Spanish 5, simply because they want to stretch out their pathway. You have taught Spanish 4?
Yep.
Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say in my Spanish 4 class that I teach, I do have some students who speak Spanish natively as their first language, and I think that that's what I see as well, that it was their choice that they feel more comfortable starting in Spanish 4, but I would say the majority start in that AP Spanish 5 level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Just one follow-up. In the districts that you had mentioned here, had either one of them recently changed their curriculum or switched
Yes.
to this?
Entre Culturas is fairly new. That's the one that Arrowhead has. That is the one that we settled on that we would pilot in addition to Reporteros. The Reporteros was adopted by eAchieve over the summer, and so we are going with that as well. We were just really blown away by the tech resources and the interactive nature. It's very inquiry-based, very project-based, very communication-based, and there's an opportunity for us to align our entire department, including eAchieve, around a singular resource if the team likes that resource and recommends that resource.
I have a question just on in the context of the AP courses specifically. So College Board has their own standards about replacement of materials. How does that apply to what we're trying to do as well?
Well, interesting enough that Spanish world language materials are not often recommended for replacement. There are very few of them on the market, and so I can tell you with Spanish language and culture, there's about 3 that we can choose from. The difference between those resources for teachers has to do with the tech and media availability. The teacher resources in terms of differentiating and supporting students that are either struggling or accelerating, that is what will make the difference, I think, for teachers. For the AP Spanish literature, that book, Azulejo, has been in place since I can remember. It is a text that contains very antiquated literature. Basically, it's a literature text. And so there aren't a lot of needs to revise it. What we need to do is just take a look in piloting it if we need to acquire any digital resources, in which case we would make a recommendation to acquire those digital resources or complete the set that we have. We've had quite a lot of growth in AP Spanish language since the time that we purchased the initial materials over a decade ago, and simply need to make sure that we've got enough resources to meet the needs of the students.
Do the Spanish language and lit AP courses replace the English requirement?
No, they do not.
Okay, so they're taking simultaneously language or literature in English?
No, because the freshman students that come in are predominantly, the dual language students take the AP Spanish language as freshmen. Typically, the AP Spanish or the AP English language class is taken as an 11th grader, so they don't take them at the same time. They take them in different years. As 10th graders, our students in dual language are taking AP Spanish literature, which is a course many English students don't take until they're seniors in high school.
Okay. So are they teaching similar standards, like, for example, the concepts of oration or speech? Is that happening in both?
Yes, they are very, very similar in courses. However, teaching those skills through another language is a lot about refining and bringing the language into what I would say an academic and professional context, lifting it out of the classroom and bringing it to a much higher level. What we have found with these courses is that when students are taking these in Spanish, there's a higher likelihood that they actually choose to take these courses in English as they get older and are successful in doing that.
Thank you. Anything else? I know Mr. Brooks asked about the volume of participation. I think when you decide on your final resources and come back and make that recommendation, I think we'll see a little bit more as far as the volume of resources that will be applied and what the cost breakdown and
Absolutely.
things look like for that. Okay, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, we'll make a full detailed recommendation so that everyone is aware of what the request is.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, our next item for discussion is an update on, our annual update on the 3-year library plan. And so I'll send it back to Mrs. Gennerman.
Thanks so much. So I have 2 team members joining me up here. As they come up, I'll introduce them. Melissa Yao, who is the Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning for K through 5th, as she always says. And then Josh Regath, who is one of our library media specialists at the elementary level. He and one other librarian serve all the elementary schools. So tonight they're going to be partnering with me, just providing a little bit of an update on the library plan and where we're at.
Welcome.
So I'll kick us off. Previously, we had brought a long-term library plan to the board for approval. So this is really our annual update to provide you. What I included in board docs was a printout of the 2023-24 library media plan, where we had just noted our progress throughout the year on all of our different strategic actions in the areas that they were focused on. So that's included for you to review. But more importantly, we wanted to highlight things that we're going to do this year. So prior to jumping into our strategic actions for this year, I wanted to give an overall view of our resources and how we've allocated them for our common school funding. As I've shared previously, there's limitations and requirements of what can and can't be used for that. So it's not funds that can be used in any way. So what we've done is we've broken it out to different aspects of our library program. So what you'll see here is we have digital subscriptions and databases that we use for all of our schools. That includes something like Lightbox or World Book. And then we also have non-capital technology that we use, again, for all of our schools. Overdrive and Destiny 2 library systems that we use throughout our system. In addition, these funds really, all of these funds allocated here, we break them down for the elementary, middle, and high school based on our strategic actions for the year. So we have about 100,000 that are going to support our curriculum, which we'll be talking about tonight. At the middle school level, we have a technology refresh, and we're working to build our goggle, our virtual reality goggle experience to enhance curriculum pieces at the middle school level. And Josh is here tonight. He'll be talking about enhancing our Spanish collection, which we are committed to devoting funds to that to enhance our Spanish collection at the high school. Of these funds, this is what we're looking at as our funds off the top. And then any other leftover money is distributed to the schools where the librarians work with the principals on what other specific needs are needed at the library. Our strategic plan has allowed us to really funnel the money towards our strategic actions. So we just wanted to share a breakdown of that, and we're excited about just some of the things that we're doing. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to the team to talk more about some of these specific things. So the things circled are what we're going to highlight for you tonight in just the overview.
Sure. So, as part of the budget wedge of our library plan, we've targeted spending for Spanish collection development to support our district's robust dual language program. We decided to focus on the middle and high school levels because we don't have a bilingual librarian on staff at those levels to support purchasing. I work normally with the elementary level, but I am the only bilingual librarian on staff, so I've been helping with middle and high school. So what I've been doing is I've been working with the literacy coaches and program coordinators at those levels to create lists of books to purchase to support our students' interests as well as the curriculum at those levels. Last year we focused on the middle schools, where roughly 20% of our student population participates in the dual language program, but only 6% of our collections in the library were in Spanish. As a result of our focused spending as part of the library plan, the percentage of our collections in Spanish increased, and a significantly greater number of books were acquired last year. Last year, we almost tripled the number of books that we acquired, 986 books compared to our average year, which is about 360. So a pretty good increase in books to kind of fill that collection gap that we have for Spanish. This year, we're focusing on the high school levels where there's still a significant number of students that participate in dual language, as we kind of just heard. But we have a small percentage of books that are available in Spanish. To make sure we're getting the books that will be used and checked out, I'm working with the multilingual coordinator, Jamie Dittman, as well as the AP teachers to curate lists that connect to the curriculum and the standards set by the College Board. Obviously, since we're doing some curriculum review. We're then going to be using those lists to source books for our libraries as well as our digital collection on Sora, where we have similar gaps in Spanish books available.
All right, so another piece that we are focusing on this year is making connections at the elementary level to our new curricular resource benchmark education. And as you heard about during the process of adoption, is that our new resource is a knowledge building curriculum. So here on the right side of the screen, you will see the units across all grade levels. So there 9 units that we are focusing on this year. They alternate between a science focus, a literary focus, and then a social studies type focus. They are 3-week units. So we just completed our first unit of life science. So across all grade levels, everyone had a focus on life science. So in kindergarten, they were learning about life cycles. In first grade, they were learning about life cycles. In second grade, they were learning about plants and learning about like Venus flytrap. And in fifth grade, they were learning about corn. And you're probably thinking 3 weeks of learning about corn. It was absolutely amazing. They learned how it impacts the economy, how it can also provide things in the area of health. And with the curriculum, they also give a list of trade books or books that you would read in the library, such as picture books and things like that, and suggest books that are related to the topic of study to help build that background knowledge as well. So the library team has taken a look at those suggested books, seeing which books we already have in the library, and then what are the additional ones that we could purchase to help fill in those gaps. That allows for those books to then be on display in the library, to be encouraged for kids if they're wanting to learn even more about that topic to be able to check those out. It is also allowed for our elementary library team to put together a scope and sequence and choose some of those suggested read aloud books to use as a read aloud when our students are going to the library. So it's a very exciting time where we're able to align our curricular resources and our opportunities for students to go to the library, have a read aloud there, and then also check out books maybe related to the curriculum that they're studying or any of the other wonderful books that we have.
Can I ask a question before you go to the next one?
You may.
Yeah. Because I love just the structure and how it progresses with the grade level. Is this something in terms of this matrix that it's provided to us, or have you done the work to align these resources?
What's very exciting is this work was done for us. So it's something that we always believed in, but having the time to curate and create your own curriculum is not an easy task. We tried it and did a really great attempt, but we were able to find a resource that did this for us. So in the classroom, the students are reading text that is provided to them through the curricular resource, and then the suggestions for the alternate books that are around those same topics then are suggestions which our librarians have been able to take and identify. We already have books on this topic, or the ones that are suggested we already have in the library. They were able to purchase ones that were suggested that we didn't have yet, and then be able to say, these weren't suggested, but we have some other books that are that we have in our library that are around this topic, say like life cycles, and be able to really zone in on what are the life cycles, the books that are appropriate age for first grade.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's been very exciting that that was done for us.
It is exciting. And just a follow-up on that, so to make sure they understand how it's happening in practice. So a classroom or a group of students can come into the library and have the book read to them by a teacher, by a librarian or media specialist, or possibly maybe at the higher grade levels to one another, and then they can also check the books out and take them home?
Correct. Okay. So this year, our part of the library plan was to create a year-long plan. Our students at elementary, K through fifth grade, go to the library once a week for 30 minutes. And our library assistants or the librarian, depending on the schedule, will do a read aloud with the class or do a little lesson on maybe one of the other resources that you learned about, like how to use Destiny to find a book that you are wanting to find. And so that is mapped out through the year. And then a lot of times when students hear books read to them, then those are ones that they want to check out, or it might be a book that's a part of the series, and then they go and check out other books in that series. So it's really opening their doors to great texts that they might want to continue to read again.
That's great. Thank you.
The team has done a really good job of really making these connections and this alignment. So we're just looking forward to working more together on it, aligning these pieces. And our plan with our overall library plan for this year is just to continue these strategic actions that we've started. And then what we would do is provide another update about this time next year.
Mr. Zenobia?
So back to the benchmark resources, is that have to do with the curriculum that we have? Okay, so that.
Yep.
So is it like a new vendor then?
So-
We're actually purchasing through that, or?
Great question. So Benchmark suggests books that are written, say, like Patricia Polacco or any other author that might be out there. So the books that are being purchased are not being purchased from Benchmark, but they would be from any of the vendors that our librarians typically purchase books from. So they would not be coming from Benchmark, where our universal curriculum is coming from Benchmark.
And our vendors that we've been using for a long time, these books are readily available through them.
For the most part, most of them are. For Spanish, it was a little bit more difficult. It being a curriculum, a lot of the books are a little bit more dated. So sometimes we were finding books that were out of print. So the other elementary librarian that I work with, Melena, we were searching for books that were maybe a little bit more up to date, and were also available that we could purchase to supplement where books were unavailable.
No, I think that's great. It's great that our vendors are able to supply those. It's great that we're getting those books that we want to find as opposed to maybe just what's suggested to purchase. But so back to the original slide of the amount of money that was spent. Was that the expenditure for all the common school funds for the year, or is that not completely been spent yet? That was like 632 or something.
Yeah, that's what we budgeted right off from the get-go with what we've been given in the past, and what we're said to be given so far. We should find out in November if there's additional common school funds. Typically, there has been, so there's more. So once we have that confirmation and that dollar amount, then we'll come back together as a team and talk about where are we at with current spending with some of these strategic actions. One of the things I just wrote a note to myself is we might want to invest in a couple more multiple copies of these current books that we just got. You can see we got them at every elementary school, so it was a big expense, but that might be something we want to consider with additional funds. So we would get we likely will get more funds in November and be notified of how much that is. But right now, that's what we're budgeting for in partnership with the finance department, where they're comfortable with too.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the update, for all the work. All right, our last item of business for tonight is our discussion information item, which is an update on the state assessment results.
Yeah. So joining us tonight is Jamie Hensel, who is our student service, just kidding, Director of Academic and Student Services. She is the one director that works between student services and teaching and learning, and really focuses on data assessment as well as working with the school psychologist. So tonight she's going to give an overview of our assessment data that was recently released, and kind of talk us through some of the changes and where we're at right now. And I'll turn it over to her.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So tonight, we're going to talk about specifically our statewide data for ACT, pre-ACT Secure, and then our Wisconsin Forward Exam data. So a lot of the data that we'll be looking at will be in relation to our updated KPIs. So those are the numbers that we'll go over today. And just to kind of give you a preview, so what we'll do is we'll just do a very brief overview as far as like what the assessment is, what it measures, and then we'll also look at the data from two different lenses. So when available, we'll look at an overall composite score. So that's one way to look at the data. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the second way, which is looking at the percentage of students who fall within a criterion, so like a performance level or like a readiness benchmark. All right, so we're going to jump right into looking at our ACT data. And so just as a reminder, our state uses ACT as a summative assessment. The ACT is also used as another way, which gives us a level of achievement required for students to have like a 50% chance of obtaining a B or higher, or about a 75 to 80% chance of obtaining a C or higher on like an entry-level college class. So you can see those depicted on this slide here. So those are those two different ways that we can look at the ACT. So as we look at our ACT composites, you can see this visual here. So one of the things we've been looking at throughout the years is how our performance has trended on this overall composite. So for 23-24, so our district, our overall composite score was a 19.7, which is above the state. And as you can see, since about 2021, we've continued to increase over time. So that is a celebration. All right, so we're going to look at that second way to look at our ACT data. And again, this is looking at the percentage of students who met that benchmark in the area of ELA and math. So our current KPI is looking at the percentage of 11th graders who met that college and career readiness benchmark. If we look at ELA, so currently 45% of our students met that benchmark, and you can see the graph there depicts where the state is at, which is at 40%. And you can also see the comparison from last year as well, too. When we look at math, our current students, 32% are meeting that college and career readiness benchmark. And again, if you look at the comparison to the state, we are trending above where the state is. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll dive into our pre-ACT Secure. So as a reminder, this is, again, our state summative assessment. And it looks at assessing our students in both 9th and 10th grade in English, reading, mathematics, and science. So we can, similar to what we did for our ACT data, we can look at our overall composite score, and we can break that down into our 9th grade and our 10th grade. So let's first start with our 9th grade. So our overall average composite score was a 16.1, and our state was a 16.3. So if we look at our 10th grade, our average composite score was a 17.3, which falls just under the state at a 17.4. So again, right, we know the overall composite doesn't tell the whole story, so we can look at this data in another way, and that is similar to how we looked at it for ACT. We can look at the percentage of students who are on track to meeting those college and career readiness benchmarks on the ACT. So you can see those numbers represented here. So if we break it down first into English for our 9th graders, so 49.8% were on target in English compared to the state at 49.7%. So if we stay with our 9th graders in math, so on target was for our district 25.2%, while our state was 26.4%. So if we look at 10th grade for English, so we were on target, met that benchmark at about 42%, and our state at 44.1%. And then for math, for our 10th graders, we were on target 30.6%, with our state at 31.1%.
Jamie, I just want to jump in and
Yeah.
make some connections. So the pre-ACT secure test that is given in 9th and 10th grade, this was only given 2 years. This is the test that replaced the Aspire assessment that we had done for several years.
All right, so if we dive into our statewide forward exam data, so just as a reminder, that we talked about last time, that DPI did change those performance levels, so those descriptors and those cut scores, and that's what's depicted here. So just as a reminder, given that there are some limited comparisons that we can make from years past to the present year. So we're going to jump in here to our KPIs. And our new KPI is really to look at the percentage of our 8th grade students that are falling in that meeting or advanced area, in the area of math. So our current baseline essentially is 44.7% of our 8th graders. And you can see by the bar graph here on the right where the state is currently falling as far as those percentage of 8th graders in that meeting or advanced area are falling. Okay. And now we'll look at the area of ELA. So as a reminder, our KPI is to increase the percentage of 3rd grade students who are falling in that meeting or advanced performance level. And our current baseline is 58.5%. Of our 3rd graders are currently falling within that advanced or meeting area. And again, you can see where our state is at that 51.4%, which we are above that. And this is just a summary of our current KPI indicators that we reviewed tonight. So just to review, that our current numbers, so our ELA is at 45% and our math for 32%. So for those meeting those college and career readiness benchmark in the area of ACT. In our 3rd grade data, again, looking at our baseline is at 58.5%. So increasing that. And then our ELA math data, our current proficiency is at 44.7%. So again, that's in relation to the new KPIs that we set. All right, at this time, I'd like to invite any questions about the data.
Anyone? Mrs. Koenig?
Just a quick question. I'm wondering, is this year's 9th and 10th grade from last year, those are the students where they were in the first and second year of the COVID bounce when we went virtual, right? Are they all now 9th graders and 10th graders this year?
They were 5th grade.
So they would be
Fifth,
9th
sixth
grade?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that would be the
One.
age, okay, just trying to get perspective.
Jamie, just a clarifying question. If you maybe could go back to the KPI page, or one more back, sorry. So when we said increase the percentage meeting or advanced, the 58.5 is actually coming from the new forward threshold.
Correct.
So not to so much get lost in the numbers, because unfortunately the numbers aren't super meaningful. What are we doing to try to understand the bridge between where we were at before versus where we're at now? Because when I look at that, I know that there was a 10, almost 11 point just threshold change because of what the state did with the assessments, that I struggle to be confident that we're meeting our goals, because I don't know what the number means, to be honest. So what are you all doing when you contemplate how we respond to student performance?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that we do, so during like our all administration time, is like we will spend some time like diving into our data and looking more specifically at it. One of the things too is our schools have item analyses that I share with them, which basically like allows us to like drill down to like the standards and where are we proficient on some of those standards. So we can really get to the granular level to see what is it that our students are, more secure with in the specific items. So I'd say that helps us to really focus down on what are some of those standards that we're hitting and what are those standards that maybe we're not solid on yet.
And I would share, I know previously we had talked about just our continuous improvement process, that item analysis that Jamie's speaking of, we didn't just get it now just because the results are public. We really started that work this summer. So building principals had that. So as they met with directors in the summer in their school teams, they were able to use that along with brainstorming with directors too about what curriculum pieces we're working on to see how those things merge together. But that's been a huge piece in Jamie's role is really digging into what is being asked, what standards and how our students are performing.
So is it a fair summary to say, at least over the last few years, that our learning recovery and student performance has at least been outpacing or beating the state averages as it relates to the forward exam? I think the ACT is looking a little bit different to me, but is that fair on the forward exam side?
Yeah, I would say so. And even if we look at, although we can't compare this last year's performance, like even looking at this graph up here where we can see over time, our district has been above the trend of where like the district or where the state is rather. So
And widening that space a little
Yeah.
bit? So we have this whole new set of results this year, and we as a district or as a school or as a program can't say necessarily whether we've gotten better. And my understanding though is that whatever the new algorithm is, which we also don't understand on the school report cards, will be more heavily weighted toward individual student growth where there's a higher socioeconomic need. So if the state can't tell us whether a district or a school or a grade has grown, how are they going to measure whether a student has grown? Do we know?
So one of the things that has stayed consistent as far as like when, and we'll talk about this too during the report card share out, is student growth. So the way that student growth is calculated, so we can look at how much growth a student has made from like last year to this year. So that will be consistent as far as like comparisons from previous years.
So how does a parent or a teacher know that if the test changed and the threshold on the test changed?
So so that would be one of the things, like, it will be a little tricky as far as like when they get those individual student reports, because that will show the performance of this past year. But there are also, I think, when we look at multiple data sources and looking at like our district assessment data as well, our formative and our summative assessments from like classroom data. So those are all pieces that I think are important to the mix when we look at, has the student really shown growth? So I think this is one piece of that puzzle, but I think keeping all those other assessment data pieces are important too. When we look at, has a student really grown and are they achieving? Yeah.
So is there still a percentile level that
Yes.
the individual student is
Yes,
being
they will
assessed
still get a
at?
percentile.
So regardless of the threshold for meeting at the state level, there's a student percentile?
Yes.
Which is typically based on historical data of which we have none.
They will get a percentile, I mean, so it'll look at comparative to other students who have taken that assessment, so it will compare it to, like, the newer results. That percentile will be based on that assessment. Yeah,
For that school year?
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Zenobia?
So from what we've looked at, regardless of how the tests have changed, but the forward exam and the ACT are the most consistent things that we can look at from what those scores have done, regardless of the changes that have been made in the last couple of years. So it's not quite the complete barometer of what you want to be able to look at, I guess. Are we not allowed to look at what our student scores are at a granular level where we're looking at everything, all the data that we have for the district and saying this school performed better than it did last year? Or, I mean, I guess internally, I guess I don't understand why no school district can say we're performing better just internally. I know that's probably monumental, but it's very hard to look at all of these floating things and make any real determination of what the improvement actually is. I guess as a parent looking at a report card, everyone knows, is my son or daughter doing better than they were a week ago, last quarter, whatever. But, for us, that overview it's very hard to see. We're at similar proficiencies that we were years ago, and yet we meet and exceed expectations. I mean, so.
It definitely is. I mean, it is challenging, for the whole, district. I think even speaking to so there's a different chart really suggesting the recommendation is that this is a baseline with their adjustments of the results for that Wisconsin Forward exam. Unfortunately, the changing in tests, it just is something that's happened. So even before those charts, remember we had that year of Badger, and then before that it was something else. So we continue to do our best in using the data to really drive our instruction and our strategic actions. And we try to work with principals and building teams to really get more to that granular level and looking at the standards. But it is something I think in education we've struggled with. But we're always going to focus on continuous improvement, no matter what the number is. So,
One sec. I think one of the things I just want to point out on this particular page too is that we moved away from this previous KPI because I think we all recognize that 50% was a goal that reflected improvement, but we could never be comfortable with that number because it wasn't good enough. And so when we talk about the new KPI, which is to continue to increase that rate, it's continuous improvement. We just can't be satisfied looking at a number of 58.5 and say, we did it, because we didn't. And we have to also just not be satisfied with that, aside from the fact that we don't know what that means until we get subsequent years of data. It doesn't necessarily reflect that the goal was met. And so I think that's where most of us are just wanting the feedback that are the strategies that we're using and are the investments that we're making. And then Ms. Genneman, your whole department has invested so much time and effort into replacing curriculum and getting into, structured and contiguous materials. And we believe that all of that is going to make a difference. We also have this massive gap in learning that happened still for a majority of our students, right? So there's a lot of recovery that has to happen, but it just, now we're just kind of stuck here. with wanting to get that feedback, but really not having a great measuring stick to get it from. Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. Real quick, do you happen to know of, in our latest forward exam results, how those results looked like in terms of the achievement gaps between black and white students, Hispanic students, and white students, economically disadvantaged students, special needs kids? Do we see any trends one way or another within those different demographic groups?
Yeah, and we'll talk more too, like when the school report card results come out. The report card does provide some information about, like, especially like with our growth and our achievement among groups. And so I can share that data at that time too about those.
Perfect. Yeah, the only reason I asked is just because I know several weeks ago we discovered, not we as the school district of Waukesha, but an organization discovered via some open records requests when Dr. Underly was going through and kind of asking for advice about revising the cut scores and everything for the forward exam. She specifically asked about these groups, and they told her that this change in the cut scores would widen achievement gaps amongst those disadvantaged and vulnerable groups. So I was curious to see if we saw that here or not.
Sure. Anybody else? Maybe just as a reminder for everybody that we do have a board level access to the WISE dashboard. And I don't know if you guys have made any changes to that, but if anybody doesn't know how to get access to that, I think you can reach out to Ms. Skinnerman's department, and because there's a lot of really good data in there and it's all recent. So there's the WISE dashboard that's on the state level where you can see and download a lot of data, but then we also have a board level portal for the, I think it's the more proprietary WISE-local.
Yeah, WISE-local, so that we use internally, where you guys have a page as well as our administrators, and they have different access. So I'm happy to sit down and go through any of that with anybody.
So a lot of those different subgroups and things are things that we can kind of dive into a little bit. Okay. Thank you so much for going through all of this and putting it together. I know there's so much more behind all of the data that before you got here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The I think the school report cards are scheduled for when? Or at least targeted for when?
I believe for some reason November 19th is sticking out in my head for release, and then we have them on the December teaching and learning, which I think is December 3rd, that we would come and summarize those results.
Thank you.
Don't quote me on the 19th.
All right. All right. Are there any recommendations for future meetings or topics? Okay, well, that concludes our meeting for tonight then. And as Ms. Gennerman said, our next meeting is Tuesday, December 3rd at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. Have a good night, everybody.